What's happening, Cardinal Nation? Welcome back to the CardinOLL podcast, a classroom podcast that has been designed to interview expert leaders and gain their insight, which will take your leadership and your learning to the next level as quickly as we possibly can. Let me start off with a quote today. Challenges make you discover things about you that you never really knew. That quote was made by the late icon Cicely Tyson, who was an actress and fashion model. With February being Black History Month, you don't want to miss any of our guests this month as we interview some of the top leaders in the community and the university. These leaders challenged themselves and they found great success. These men and women are doing a phenomenal work in the community and the university. So you don't want to miss listening to this Black History Month edition of the CardinOLL podcast. I'm Dr. C. Sean Owens, also known as the Professor Owens, and I'm going to bring in my co-host, the incomparable, the one, the only, Dr. Andrew McCart. Dr. McCart, how you doing today?
Dr. Owens, I'm doing great. Thank you. It's good to still be incomparable after all these years. I appreciate that introduction. I'm glad to be here. And I say this every week, but we've got a great guest here, and I know you've got an introduction lined up, but this individual's got more degrees than a thermometer and is doing great things here at the University of Louisville. So I'm excited to get into it.
Hey, no doubt, no doubt. I also want to let our listeners know, right, as of today, as of this broadcast, you can now find us audio version on Spotify and Google Podcasts. Just type in the CardinOLL. So not only will we be on YouTube, we're now on Spotify, we're on Anchor, and we are on Google Podcasts. So before we jump into today's special guest, I want to let our listeners know this. If you or someone you know want to learn to lead with compassion and expertise in a changing world and obtain a degree from award-winning faculty within a nationally recognized program in the areas of leadership and learning, go to UofL.me/BSOLL-podcast. Again, that's UofL.me/BSOLL-podcast. So let me introduce our special guests for today, because I know everyone's on pins and needles waiting and trying to figure out who's going to be this third person that joins this great conversation. Our guest today, he is from the west end of Louisville, most specifically. So everyone out there, he is a Card born and bred through and through. He attended Shawnee High School, so shout out to Shawnee High School. He is a former college athlete. He played basketball at Berea College. He's a 2007 graduate of the College of Education and Human Development, where he focused on college student personnel. Currently, he is the Associate Dean for Community Engagement and Diversity, as well as the Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Louisville School of Medicine. He is challenging and changing things within that school. So let me tell everybody, get your pens, get your pencils, get your notepads, your iPads, your memo boards, whatever you take notes with, so we can head into the classroom and learn from today's great leader, the one, the only, Dr. Dwayne Compton. Dr. Compton, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you all for this opportunity to engage with you all on podcast this afternoon.
Man, anytime. We love sharing our podcast. We want our students, our listeners, our viewers to really take some nuggets away in the areas of leadership, in the areas of learning. And obviously, we want to talk a little bit about diversity today as well, with it being Black History Month.
All right. I'm here for it.
All right. So, we jump right in here on the CardinOLL podcast. We don't waste a lot of time. So let me jump right in with this. So Dr. Martin Luther King said this. He said, "A leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus." So we know what Dr. Martin Luther King's definition of leadership is. But Dr. Compton, how do you define leadership?
Yeah, so I define leadership as one who is able to be just as good of a observer, listener, and follower as good as well as they are a leader, right? You have to have the ability to listen to individuals that you work with, to always have a lifelong learning kind of spirit, and to also be willing to follow. I think oftentimes when people think of leaders, they think about the person that's out in front. But real leaders, in my opinion, are individuals who's also willing to roll up their sleeves and get in the trenches with the individuals that they're working with. So leadership is fluid. It's always changing. And so you have to change your leadership style based off the situations that you're in.
Okay. Dr. Compton, I think you might be the first person. I mean, everyone that we bring on the podcast has a unique definition of leadership, but I don't recall anybody, Dr. McCart, that brought in observation. What do you think?
Well, that kind of goes into my next question, and that ability to read the room as part of leadership and understanding what it is by being a follower too, and letting other people, when it's time, to let them step in. And ultimately it comes down to the leader for their responsibility to make the decision. But that kind of goes into my question here. And this is something that Dr. Compton's spoken about, and it's on emotional intelligence. And so whenever you talk about your definition of leadership and the observing, and I think part of that, of reading the room, as I said, has to do with that emotional intelligence. So would you care to comment on that a little bit in your definition of leadership and your style?
Yeah, definitely. So when you think about emotional intelligence, you think about the ability to build and sustain, foster significant relationships, right? Whether that's within your team, whether that's within your family, whether that's within your community. At the same time, you have to be able to manage your emotions in a variety of situations. You may be in a situation where you find yourself frustrated, but how do you show that emotion, or how do you deal with that emotion and still lead? Also, when you think about emotional intelligence, you think about building social capital. How do you leverage the social capital that you may have in whatever endeavor that you may be embarking upon to get the outcomes that you're looking for? So being able to build, sustain, and foster relationships, being able to manage your emotions, I think really great leaders have to be able to do that regardless of the situation. If you're a leader and and everything is in chaos, and then of course you're the first one that's out the front door, then people may, that's not a good sign of leadership, right? They always say that the captain of the ship is the last person to go down, and you have to have that mindset that whatever's happening, if the house is burning down, you will be the last one out. You ensure that everyone else is out before you, not the first one out trying to save yourself. So for me, that's where emotional intelligence comes into play, is being able to balance your emotions and manage them in a way that's going to allow you to get the outcomes that you need, working with a team, working, with students, or whatever the capacity that you may be working in.
I think those are great points there. And right before this will kind of date the podcast, I guess, but right before I came over here, I was listening to the call where President Bendapudi was interviewing Simon Sinek here at the University of Louisville. And a fan of his, one of the things he said was that really what you're saying right here, Dr. Compton, is that the fostering relationships and the social capital, working with others and being on a team. And he made a comment there that sometimes we just need a person to believe in us, and that can give us the courage then to go forward and to walk into things that we might not otherwise want to do. And that leadership is a team sport. And that's really kind of what you're saying there. And I'm glad you touched on those things, because it is. None of us are in a vacuum, whether we're at the College of Ed, or whether we're School of Medicine, or we're working out in industry where a lot of our students are. It's just super important there to learn how to work with those relationships. And Dr. Owens, what would you add to that?
No, I mean, I think those are all phenomenal things. I think everything you're asking and stating, it does go into my next question for Dr. Compton as well. And it just says, so you sit at and you hold a very visible position, right? One would say it's a leadership position. And so, but we know you just, some might say you got there overnight, but we all know that it never happens overnight. I think I heard a preacher say over the weekend, he said 10 years equals overnight, right? So what most people see overnight, it took someone 10 years to accomplish. And so as the Associate Dean and the Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Louisville for the School of Medicine, which try saying that 10 times fast, right? Tell us about your leadership journey and how you kind of came up with the emotional intelligence and all those other, nuggets you picked up along the way.
Yes, so great question, and happy to share. And as you indicated, this is, where I am now is not something that happened overnight. I do have to go back to high school, right? I'm gonna go back to my days at Shawnee High School. And of course, I recognize that I stand on the shoulders of giants. I stand on the shoulders, and I'm a representation of individuals who have poured into me. So when I was a student at Shawnee High School, I participated in a program called Travel and Tourism. We had 3 branches of travel and tourism. You had the aviation program where students could get their pilot's license. You had an aviation mechanics program for those that were more mechanically inclined. And then you had the customer service and travel agent component of the travel and tourism program. While I was in the customer service, travel agent based portion of the aviation program at Shawnee. And, of course, Mr. Gerald White, Ms. Denise Reynolds, Ms. Carol Sullivan are 3 teachers that I will never forget. And if you ask anybody that came through those programs, those are the 3 names that's going to pop out as individuals who started us in helping us understand our worth, teaching us how to engage with one another as a team, also having faith in ourselves and beliefs in ourselves that whatever we put our minds to, we can accomplish. So, I start with that program. We were able to travel outside of West Louisville, outside the state of Kentucky, to go to different places and have some cultural exposures and experiences that would allow us to grow. Then, of course, I had the opportunity to go to Berea College. And I always like to make note that me going to Berea College, yes, I played college basketball, and that was icing on the cake for me. But going because of the deep-rooted history that Berea College has, really is what compelled me to go to Berea College. So I encourage people to look up the history of Berea College, since this is Black History Month, because they do have a lot of history. But nonetheless, while I was there, every student at Berea College has to work. It's not an option. They're one of several work colleges in the United States. And so my first year, believe it or not, I was a janitor in a residence hall. So I spent my days cleaning hallways and restrooms, emptying garbage cans. A very humbling experience. But going into my sophomore year, I actually became a resident assistant in one of our residence halls. And then, of course, that allowed me the opportunity to start getting training and development around leadership. What does it mean to work with other residents in the residence hall and get formal training? The very next year, I was a residence hall director. So what many of the graduate assistants or even some full-time individuals do at universities like UofL, I was a residence hall director in undergrad. And I did that for roughly 2.5 years. I was RA for a semester, then did it for about 2.5 years. So, of course, that meant I had to lead a residence hall, right? I had individuals that I had to supervise and, make sure that I was not only holding myself accountable, but holding them accountable, making sure that our residents were safe and had a great experience in the residence hall during that time at Berea. And so, of course, then you couple that with my participating in basketball, right? And the discipline, dedication, and work ethic you get, and team camaraderie that you get playing collegiate sports. And so, of course, I had a great coach. We had very successful seasons, and we worked hard. So when you think about hard work, you add that in with the dedication to practice every day to make yourself better. You couple that with my work experience in the residence life. For me, it just continued to build on what I wanted to do next. Now, I'll be very transparent that working in higher ed wasn't something that was on the forefront of my mind, even though I had these experiences at Berea College working in housing and res life. Upon graduating, I just knew that I was going to go and work in a large manufacturing area in the managerial kind of arena. That didn't work out for me, and things happen for a reason. But one thing is for sure, when we talk about leadership, you talk about people being able to see things in you that you may not necessarily see in yourself. And for me, that's what set me on the pathway to working in higher ed. I had one of my mentors, Carl Thomas, reached out to me right after I graduated and wanted to have a conversation about a position that Berea had open that would allow a person to recruit right here in Louisville, and as well as Lexington, Kentucky, Cincinnati, Ohio, and things of that nature. So long story short, Carl Thomas, Joe Bagnoli, the director of admissions at the time, they hired me to come back to Berea right after I graduated, probably about 6 months after I graduated, to assume a role as an admissions counselor. So I came back, assumed a role as an admissions counselor, and recruited, all over the state of Kentucky and Southeast Ohio, primarily focused on diversity recruiting students that look like me. One of the first places I wanted to go back to was Shawnee High School. Then, of course, I started thinking more and more about, all right, what's next for me? I was an admissions counselor. I was promoted to assistant director for admissions. At the same time, once the coach that I played for retired, he recommended that I serve as one of the new coaches' head assistants. So I became a college assistant basketball coach as well for Berea College. And after being at Berea for about 4.5 years, I started thinking, what do I want to do? I want a master's degree, but not sure in what. Had an opportunity to engage with a number of individuals, but another pivotal mentor for me is Dr. Michael Suje. He's Professor Emeritus from the College of Education and Human Development. At the time, he oversaw the College Student Personnel Master's Program. I engaged with him, and the rest is history. I ended up coming on back home, was able to get a position working in undergraduate admissions, primarily with diversity recruitment, and doing my master's at the same time. So I was a full-time student, full-time employee, working in undergrad admissions. And so, again, was fortunate to have some experience, take advantage of opportunities serving on different committees and things like that within the university. And as I start to think about, all right, what are some things that I need to grow within higher ed? Because I started really loving the higher ed space, right? And I started thinking, all right, is the college presidency the end goal? Right? What is the end goal for me? And at the time, it was the college presidency. I want to be a university president. So what type of things, what type of skills and competencies do I need in order for me to put myself in a position someday to be a university president? And so I started really being intentional and leaning again, I'll say it again, leaning again on my mentors who I could sit and have conversations with and run things past, who could give me some very sound advice. So I left from the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. I went to the university-wide Office of Community Engagement, working with a program called Go College, Gaining Options for College, and allowed me to work back at Shawnee High School. Did that for a couple of years, and then I made my transition back to campus, working in the College of Education and Human Development and advising the student services. And after about a year or so, I actually applied for an internal opportunity to be the director of the Minority Teacher Recruitment Program. Which I really, it was near and dear to me because that was another program I participated in when I was in high school at Shawnee, and I saw the need for diversifying the teacher workforce, and so this would put me in a position to be able to do that. So I did that for a few years, and then of course an opportunity that really looked like the culmination of all my experiences opened up at the School of Medicine. So when I started at the School of Medicine, it was in the executive director for diversity initiatives. And when I thought about the university landscape, I had spent about roughly 10 years on Belknap campus, and I had no idea what the health science campus, how it functioned, how it operated. So I thought it would give me an opportunity to stretch myself individually and as well as a leader to go into a space that I knew nothing about, right? The research sciences, the healthcare, the clinical settings and things like that. But I knew diversity and inclusion. And I knew I had the skills and wherewithal to be able to engage with people from a wide, diverse population to get the job done. And so here it is 6 years later. I'm still at the School of Medicine. I've had an opportunity to have my position reclassed from Executive Director for Diversity Initiatives to now Associate Dean for Community Engagement and Diversity and Chief Diversity Officer. I also have a faculty appointment as well. And so I teach both, and I teach. My primary faculty appointment is in the School of Medicine, but I also still help teach classes in the College of Education and Human Development in the College Student Personnel Program. So,
man, that is a unique journey, right? Like, I mean, I think that because and we're laughing, but I mean, it's so true. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you never would have thought that, if we could have rewound time. And we're seeing you as an assistant basketball coach and an admissions person. Well, most people probably think you're going to climb up the ladder of the coaching realm or go for the director of admissions and just kind of figure out what happens from there, right? Maybe leave higher ed for a while, go into like corporate recruiting, right? You got this big, unique diversity background, but it just goes to show our listeners, like, there's no prescribed path, right, to get to where you want to go. You just kind of take the job, do your best at it, move on to the next one, take the job, move on, take the job, move on. You maybe have to move a little bit, right? Dr. Compton moved from a few institutions, right? I think it's a great story, in my opinion. I mean, Dr. McCart, what do you think?
No, I really enjoyed hearing that journey. And I know what you mean about the health science campus and the Belknap campus being different. I was at the School of Public Health for several years as a student, and then I only went to the Belknap campus when I had a parking ticket or something something serious. But it's got two different worlds, even though they're just a few miles apart. So anyway, I can relate to that part. But so many things that Dr. Compton said there. At Berea being a had to work college, and I've heard great things about Berea and just that idea of work. And I've always heard that's a surefire money making scheme. Is that work business, And Grandma always said it's a good place to go when you need money and you need direction. Just get to work. But I'm glad to hear that. That's a common theme we hear on this podcast, talking to successful leaders, is just dig in and do the work. And that's so much we could say about that. And really, my next question is about, and you kind of got into that, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on mentorship and some of the coaches that you've had. I mean, you mentioned Carl Thomas, you mentioned the director of admissions that you had, and some of the coaches that you've had. And maybe we'll tie it into two questions here, Dr. Owens, but if you could tell us, Dr. Compton, about some of those experiences that you had and how you are implementing some of those things into what you're doing at the UofL School of Medicine and looking to mentor others.
Yeah, the mentoring piece for me, as I said before, I've since high school, I've had some really good mentors. And really, I'll go back prior to even high school. We had some community stalwarts that poured into us to ensure that we had, activities through Metro Parks and Recreation to do at Jewel Park, which was, close to my home, and, played a number of different sports in the park with my friends. And we had folks like the White family that poured into us and made sure that we stayed out of trouble. I always had people around me that was able to say, hey, you know what, let's go down this path because we know what this path is going to offer a dead end. So I think that is important. And that's why, one, I encourage mentorship. And I'm a doer of my own word. I think it's important for myself to mentor. So I reach back and I mentor as often as I can. One of the joys of working with college students and really even high school students is the ability to see them grow, right? Plant seeds and see that those seeds grow within these young individuals, and then see where they are, to this day. And for me, I take great pride in knowing that many of the students that I help recruit to come to Berea College, I still maintain relationships with them. They still reach out for advice. Same thing with the University of Louisville. Many of the students that I interact with that have gone on, graduated, they will still text me, reach out to me on social media, LinkedIn, or however they can get in touch and say, hey, Dr. Compton, thank you for all you did. And that means the world to me. That means the world to me because someone did that for me. I owe it, I owe it to reach back and do the same. And so I tell folks to have your CEO of your team. Like you need to have a personal mentor. You need to have a professional mentor. You need to have a spiritual mentor. And at the end of the day, you have to have a circle of friends, I would say, who has your back and willing to support you, but also willing to tell you when you may be headed down the wrong path. And so for me, I've been able to forge some really strong friendships and bonds, largely with my brothers. I call them my Berea brothers. It's a large group of us that still to this day, we stay connected to the hip, so to speak. And we're still doing things and we're still champions for one another, whether it's a business venture that somebody's want to do or growth within their own sector of work that they're in. So, surround yourself with people who can pour into you and at the same time be willing to give back. So that's why I do is spend a lot of time working with our current students, and regardless to how high I go up in higher ed, I still want to maintain.
And so you kind of mentioned that you feel mentorship is important. You also mentioned that you have mentors. What would be the wise counsel advice you'd give to someone who's just starting out and they don't have a team, right? Like you just mentioned, they don't have that. Like, I'm 22, I'm 23, I'm 24. I've been a student my whole life. And now you just mentioned I need a professional mentor. I need a personal mentor. Maybe they have the circle of friends, but they're kind of missing those other things. What do you think is like that first step?
Well, the first step is once you identify somebody that you feel comfortable with, feel good about being around, enjoy being around. Oftentimes we may not consciously realize that we have a preference and we enjoy being around certain people, and we're fond of folks, and we see something in them that we aspire towards. And it's just a matter of putting I'll say from my perspective, it was, I had to put my ego to the side to ask for help, right? Or not even ask for help, but to ask for somebody to be my mentor. Some things happen organically. A lot of my mentoring relationships happened organically. Some of my mentors probably didn't even realize that they were my mentors, right? But I always go to them for questions, or I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? Or get some advice. And again, I'm in a fraternity. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I'm also a Prince Hall Mason. So for me, I'm in those spaces that I'm in. I'm interacting with men who are great family men. So I'm like, hey, great husbands. So I'm always like, hey, you know, we just celebrated in my Masonic Lodge a brother who he and his wife have been together for 62 years, right? 62 years. So of course, for me, I'm thinking to myself, what is the secret ingredient? Like, you know, how did you all make that work? So once you find things, some nuggets in people that you like and you enjoy being around them, you can't be afraid to ask, hey, would you be my mentor? Or, hey, would you mind sitting down and having coffee and donuts, or, you know, whatever your preference is. And so for me, that's what I had to get comfortable, you know, because growing up, asking for help was just kind of one of those things that was seen as a sign of weakness. So, you know, you're just kind of bashful about doing those things. So I finally, as I came into my own and realized I can't do this by myself, I see something in these gentlemen that I really value and enjoy. I need to, you know, find out what they did to be successful, because I want to be successful just like them. And so that's what I would encourage younger adults to say, you know, step outside of their comfort zone. We always say growth happens outside of your comfort zone. So step outside of that comfort zone and not be afraid of rejection. I think oftentimes that's what prevents us from asking somebody to serve as a mentor, is we have a fear that they'll tell us no. Right. And I think what most people will find is that people are willing to mentor you or be there as one of your, you know, go-to folks if you're willing to put in the work. Right. I tell students, don't set up an appointment with somebody and be late. Don't set up an appointment with somebody and not show up. Right. Communication is important. If you've gotten in the jam, you can't make it, reschedule. So I don't just talk about being a mentor, but how do you facilitate that? Right. You know, do you go to spaces and put yourself in networking spaces where you can engage with people that are different from you or have similar interests, whether it's, you know, educationally or career-wise. You know, take advantage of professional conferences. You know, starting out at Berea, one of the best things that happened was being afforded the opportunity to participate in professional conferences here in the state. And that gave me a chance to connect further with people that were in the same area of enrollment management, admissions enrollment management. And for me to be able to say, all right, how did you get to where you are? And you know, one guy, he probably doesn't even realize it to this day. His name is Dr. Aaron Thompson. He is over the Council on Post-Secondary Education. We were at a session. He said, you know what? You need to quit your job and get a master's degree. And at that time, I looked at him like, what are you talking about? I need this income. I can't quit my job, you know. But he did. He said, go get a master's degree. And once you finish that master's degree, it'll increase your opportunities for, you know, better employment and as well as a better salary. So again, I listened, right? I not only sought out people, but I listened. And that's why, as I said earlier, it's important as a leader to listen, to observe and see what's going on around you, and also be a lifelong learner. So for me, that's what I would encourage them to do.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Dr. McCart?
Wow. Well, that's Dr. Compton's going to call us to task today. I mean, growth happens outside your comfort zone. Get out there, do the work, quit your job and get a master's degree. I mean, it's getting longer as I listen here, but no, that's some great stuff there. And hanging out with smart people is kind of like putting your hand in a jar of honey. Some of it's going to stick. And I think just hanging around those people can elevate us. So there's a quote out there that says you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I used to do an exercise in my undergraduate classes where they would evaluate those people and are they having a positive impact on your life or not. And so I think that's can't be overstated, the amount of time and the quality of the people that you're choosing to let into your circle. I mean, time is a finite resource there. And so I love all the things that you said there, and reaching back out to mentor and letting your mentors know how they helped you along the way whenever you get there. I had an opportunity last week to reach back out to an old and she didn't, I don't think she knew she was a mentor. She was a former teacher in my master's degree, and she was so happy. And I was telling her some stories I remembered. And anyway, that's for the listeners. If you haven't reached back out to some of your mentors, I would encourage you to take Dr. Compton's advice, because it feels good too. So, well, let me ask you a question here, shifting a little bit. And this question really revolves around some things that you've learned during your career that you hope to implement and that you want your current organization to adopt. And I really am interested in these some of the presentations that you've done around candidates of color and the talent acquisition, and addressing something that you call the leaky pipeline in your presentations. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that's going over at the School of Medicine?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that you just noted there actually was work done while I was director of the Minority Teacher Recruitment Program in the College of Education and Human Development. It was a very collaborative effort with individuals like Dr. Shelley Thomas, Dr. Tia Dumas, Dr. Stephanie Wooten Burnett, names that you all probably, people you probably still see, Dr. Bianca Lee Nightingale, and several others. And so one of the things that I noticed whenever I stepped into the director for MTRP role was that we had this program in the Commonwealth of Kentucky that provided an opportunity for individuals who are historically underrepresented, identifies as a minority, to get funding for them to get their teaching certification so that they can go into the P through 12 classroom to teach. But also what I noticed is that so we had students that was very interested, but they were running into all sorts of barriers to getting to that end goal of getting their teacher certification. And the practice exam was one of them. There's a lot of folks that want to go into teacher education, so there's not a lack of interest. It's challenging to get through some things that I see as very systemic, systemic barriers, so to speak. And so for me, we can build pipeline programs all day, every day, but we have to equip those students that we're working with the resources they need to get over those hurdles and challenges. And one of the things that I even advocate for now is, why don't we eliminate the GRE? Why don't we eliminate the MCAT exam for med school? Why don't we eliminate the LSAT? Because when you look across many of these sectors, the commonality is there's students that have issues and troubles getting past standardized test exams. But for those students that gain access, it's clear that the standardized test is not a true test of a person's ability to be successful. I'll use myself as an example. Right. I graduated from Shawnee. I didn't have the best ACT score. I had great GPA. I had great grades, but not the best ACT score.
Right.
Graduated from Berea College. I had a fairly solid, GPA, but my GRE score was not where it needed to be. So, of course, some programs denied me. Some programs brought me in conditionally, right? But I excelled nonetheless. Same thing with a doctorate degree. I got denied from some doctoral programs solely because of my GRE, and was told that, of course, but was able to get in the Spalding University's program because they did a whole file review with looking at other aspects outside of the standardized test score. So that's what I see. So when I doing research with looking at the teacher, P through 12 teacher pipeline, and of course, now being in the School of Medicine, I find a lot of similarities. A lot of the students in both areas have a hard time getting through because of a standardized exam. But once they gain access and they're given resources to be successful, they take off and they graduate. We do well with those students. So it's something that I think we do have to take a step back and look at, because we're seeing a lack of diversity in a number of different workforce sectors. Right now, I'm reading and seeing a lot around technology, the tech boom, right, and the lack of minorities in that area. And so we know that it's not because of lack of intellect and ability and aptitude. Oftentimes, people are being met with resistance when it comes to having to qualify via a standardized exam, or not having the social capital in some cases. So for me, some of my research started when I was working at MTRP, really looking and assessing and kind of doing a review of the program. It had been around for close to 30 years. And we wanted to assess whether or not it was effective or not, based off of the teachers that we know went on to teach here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and then those who didn't. Because the downside of that MTRP, the scholarship that we had was that for every semester you got the scholarship, you had to teach a semester in order for it to be forgiven. But if you didn't go into the classroom, guess what? It turned into a loan. So we had students that were coming out with, $10,000 or more in student loans that they had to repay back because they didn't get the certification and go into the classroom. And then, of course, the other piece is, what about those that made it into the classroom? How do we retain them, right? We know that on average, 2 to 3 years in the classroom, and folks pivot and go to a different career field. Some may stay in secondary ed and may go into guidance counseling, or they may go into some other area, but they leave the classroom, right? And so if we're ever going to make an impact, we have to continue to build on the number of individuals underrepresented in the P through 12 classroom setting, and do what we can to retain them there, make it attractive for them to stay there. So, because again, at the end of the day, we have to have diverse teachers for individuals like us to look up and see. If you ask most people how many Black or Latinx teachers they've had, in their P through 12 schooling, they probably can count on one hand, and they may not even unball their fist to say one. Right. So, that's just the reality. So I think it is important to diversify and to remove barriers wherever we can. And so for me right now, it's doing that in the School of Medicine and working with undergraduate students and really starting back in high school to educate students on what type of preparation is needed for a career in medicine and science research. And then at the same time, providing opportunities to pipeline students, engage them in undergrad, and create opportunities for them to get the preparation, academic preparation, as well as shadowing experiences and things like that we know is needed when they get ready to apply for med school. So we have some areas that as a university, we have to continue to work on in terms of access and affordability for those populations that have been marginalized and historically underrepresented. And a lot of our majors and career fields and professional programs that we have.
Wow, you touched on a lot of things there, Dr. Compton, and there's just a few of those. I think we can I could talk about anything that you said there. I think is because it was all interesting. You did mention the technology and how really it's an underrepresented field for minorities, and even women are underrepresented in terms of the algorithms written with artificial intelligence. And in medicine, we look at the Internet of Things and deep learning and machine learning. Again, those are fields dominated by really a certain type of people, and without acquiring talent and encouraging people, removing barriers, as you say, with standardized tests and other barriers, it's going to be more of the same. So I think that this is there's a lot that can be learned, not only for what you're saying, the teacher recruitment, teacher education, but also in technology and other fields, healthcare. It goes across the board, really. So, Dr. Owens, I'll turn it over to you for a question.
No, I mean, I think that ties into kind of, you may have answered the question, kind of repeating it, but I just want to know, Dr. Compton, in your opinion, how do you think that learning has changed or is changing at the University of Louisville in the School of Medicine? I know you mentioned a little bit of maybe some things we could do or kind of do differently, but, as far as, because when we do bring in, right, a more diverse student population, obviously we know culturally everybody learns at a different level, a different speed. I remember when I was a football coach, right, I remember reading an article about Urban Meyer when he had just taken over at the University of Florida, and Chris Leak was the quarterback, and the staff they had put together was very traditional, right? So they were learning a lot in the classroom. But Chris Leak was a very kinesthetic learner. So putting him on the whiteboard wasn't the best way for him to go out and show you he knew what he knew to do. And Urban Meyer was like, listen, I don't care if you got to walk through every play with him. This is the guy that's got to play for us on Saturday. So for the backup, maybe it's okay to put him on the whiteboard. But Chris Leak, you got to walk the play, walk him through that play, what his reads are, what his check down is. That being said, how do you see the School of Medicine changing, or the PK through 12 system, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I'll go back to technology, right? And increasing the use of technology and the way that we educate students. So once upon a time in medical education, it was classic for students to be in the classroom face to face with their instructors, as well as being in the clinical setting, one-on-one, working with their attendings and residents and things of that nature to learn how the hospital system operates. Well, now a lot of our students are actually learning virtually, right? Before COVID-19 hit, many of our students were learning from various tech platforms that we were using to do lectures, right? So they can go in and so all of our students, they receive a laptop. Those laptops come pre-programmed. And so students can go in and watch a lecture as many times as they want to. They can speed it up, they can slow it down. But the key is that they have that resource to refer back to as often as they need to. So that's one way, for us that we try to educate students. We still offer smaller, what we call PBL, problem-based learning groups. So we break our students into smaller groups so that they can have dialogue, right, and learn that way. And again, it's why it's important to have diversity. When you have diversity, you have more innovation, diversity of thought, higher productivity. And when folks from different backgrounds can come and share their experiences, it makes it good for the entire group, the entire collective. So we have our small problem-based learning groups. We use technology. We have our traditional student affairs office that work with students one-on-one. So we still offer the tutoring and things like that. And I think that I'm seeing a lot of that even within the P through 12 arena as well. I think about right now with my kids being on NTI, the non-traditional instruction. The teachers are coming on through Google Meets, and it's a ton of things that they can do through Google Meets. But at the same time, they have Clever and Study Island and different apps and this is the generation. They know how to utilize those apps better than we do, right? And they learn a lot. So being able to, I think a key point of leadership, which is what we're talking about, is being able to be innovative and adjust with the times instead of trying to do the same old things that we were doing 10, 20 years ago that are outdated. For our medical students, they're learning. They're being trained on how to deliver medicine and healthcare through telemedicine, right? That's huge, right? For them to learn how to utilize Google Glasses or smart glasses to engage with patients that may be 2 hours away, right? Or may not have transportation, but really need a check-in, check-up type of visit. So we're utilizing all the technology that we can to give our students an advantage when they go into practice. So I agree that we have to leverage all of our resources, and some traditional methods work, but we also have to use technology as well. And so I know some folks are uncomfortable with technology because it's still new and foreign to them, but the reality is, again, just as we're asking our students to come out of their comfort zone to learn new things, we as faculty and administrators and staff have to do the same thing. We can't continue to try to do the same old thing and expect our students to grow and develop and whatnot. So.
No, it's great stuff. That's great stuff. I think that's very interesting. I applaud that 100%. And like you said, technology is new. I mean, my kids tell me the same thing. They're telling me about these new apps, and I have no idea what they're doing. I mean, I hope that they're learning at the end of the day, because there's no way I know how to assess if it's really taking place or not. That's good to know. Dr. McCart.
Yeah, I think we've got to keep up with things. I've got 2 young nephews that they think I'm a dinosaur. So I've got to stay hip and stay current. There's a lot to keep up on, and especially in the teaching profession. I mean, our bachelors in healthcare leadership or bachelors in organizational leadership and learning have both been online for a long time. Now, the healthcare leadership is a branch off of that original program, but we're some of the pioneers and innovators in online education at the University of Louisville. And it wasn't as rocky of a transition for us whenever in last March, you all will both remember, the University of Louisville said, all right, spring break's going to be 2 days longer and everything's online when you get back. And all of a sudden, we were looking around like something was missing. And so, but we were able to transition. And I think that it's only accelerated things with the pandemic. So telemedicine, as you mentioned, has gone up, and it's not without its hiccups. I mean, there's some reimbursement issues to try and get paid the same with telemedicine, things like that. But I'm getting off topic here. But Dr. Compton, I'd like to ask you a new question here, a different question on data collection. And so we always find it interesting to ask our guests this. Last week, we talked to Mr. Cleo Battle, who's with Louisville Tourism. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you know Mr. Battle.
Yeah,
it was a great guest. And so when you're in charge of the whole city and getting people interested in it, what do you measure? And he said it had to do with hotel occupancy rates and the number of hotel rooms and the average rate. Well, so I wanted to ask you, with so much data, algorithmic world, assessment data driven, what are some of your data points and your key performance indicators in your role? And what's the importance of that to you and the goals that you have?
Yeah, so and I'll start primarily with the diversity, equity, inclusion, arena. So for us, it's really looking at starting with presence data. So looking at presence data and looking at our demographics, where are we with regard to our student population? That's on the MD, within the MD programs, as well as in our master's and PhD programs. Are we advancing diversity? What's the 5-year trend? What's that trend line? Are we making more offers? Are we matriculating more students from historically underrepresented areas? The same is true for our faculty, tenure track or even, term track faculty members, right? What does that demographic data look like? When we have opportunities, how are we embracing opportunities to grow diversity within our faculty ranks? So I'm looking at those data points as well in terms of, who are we bringing in to interview? Who are we making offers to? And then who's accepting those offers, right? But then also at the point, it's not necessarily a data point, but it kind of is. When we're conducting searches for faculty positions, how many of the search committee members are taking advantage of the search committee training, right? It's going to help them understand where biases and things of that nature may creep in to prevent them from making an offer or weighing in favor of somebody that's from an underrepresented area. And then, of course, within senior leadership. So we're looking at students, we look at our faculty ranks, we look at staff, but we also look at staff, but more so within our director level and those decanal positions. So for us, it's presence data. And then, of course, we offer a number of implicit bias, microaggression type of cultural competency type of trainings. Who's coming to those trainings? And then, of course, evaluating the surveys to see how are we changing attitudes. So those data points, they're more qualitative in nature for us. But, are we changing attitudes and behavior through engagement in trainings around diversity, equity, and inclusion? So then the other part of my role is looking at our community engagement efforts. What's the frequency of our and impact? So frequency and impact of our community engagement efforts locally within the Louisville community, as well as across the Commonwealth of Kentucky and then even Southern Indiana. So looking at that type of data helps inform us as well, right? We want, of course, the university has the Signature Partnership Initiative, which is focused on West Louisville. So how many of our departments have ongoing engagement activities in West Louisville, and are they assessing the impact of those activities? And so for me, it's looking at not just the diversity, equity, inclusion side of things, but it's also looking at the community engagement side of things and trying to measure impact as well. So we look at those data points too.
Nice.
Well, those sound like the key things, and I would have known all of those. And the community engagement here, looking at your resume, you certainly do a lot of that. If this, I don't know how you get it all done. If this is all up to date, but Louisville Metro Department of Public Health and Wellness, serving on the board, Park Duval Community Health Center, the Alumni Board of University of Louisville, Girl Scouts of Kentuckiana. And we do see that you have 3 daughters in your bio, so that sounds like that keeps you busy. Yes, and Berea College Executive Alumni Committee. So you also walk the talk. You are involved in the community as well as encouraging your colleagues to do that. So we have to respect that. Dr. Owens, can I turn it over to you for the next question?
Yeah, no problem. But before we get into the next question, I just want to let our listeners and viewers know that learning takes place in great environments, and that one of those great environments at the University of Louisville. Come challenge yourself to lead with compassion and expertise in a changing world, and learn from award-winning faculty and a nationally recognized program that specializes in leadership and learning. Check out our bachelor's and master's degree programs at UofL.me/podcast-OLL. Again, that's UofL.me/podcast-OLL. We're going to come into the close or coming down the home stretch in our questioning, but I just want to ask you this question, Dr. Compton. Tell us about some of the UofL School of Medicine diversity initiatives, or just your top initiatives that you guys got going on right now. I know if we looked at your bio and looked at all the articles, we don't know what's happening in order, but what are some of the things you got going on right now?
Yeah, so right now, one of the things we've been doing is working to build relationships with JCPS high schools. So we're engaging Louisville Central High School. They have a pre-med program, nursing, dental hygiene, vet science, a STEM robotics program. And then, of course, for us, Central High School is largely African-American. And of course, it's in West Louisville. We're also engaging with Wagner High School, as well as PRP High School and more traditional school to try to engage students earlier in the pipeline, right? We just started conversations to engage the Olmsted North Academy. And then we're having conversations with the W.E.B. Du Bois and Grace James Academies. And so working to enhance our pipeline, we engage with the Northwest AHEC. So we're actually the statewide office for the area health education centers. There's 8 across the state. We do partner with the University of Kentucky. They work with the 4 Eastern AHECs. We work with the 4 Western AHECs, and these are individuals that's providing various training for allied health professionals in their communities throughout the state. So for us here in Louisville, we have the Northwest AHEC office that is headed by Ms. Brenda Fitzpatrick. And so we work with them on some of their youth development programs. One of the benefits of our office, too, is that we get a chance to work and collaborate with the Health Science Campus Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And so we collaborate to offer a number of different trainings throughout the year on implicit bias, microaggression, stereotype threat, being an upstander, bystander. What does that mean, right? To be a bystander or be an upstander versus a bystander. Then at the same time, we have a number of summer programs that we engage with that are pipeline based. Couple other things. So the word now that everybody's kind of looking at the School of Medicine about is we just hired a director for anti-racism. We hired someone, Dr. John Chenault. He is going to be working with our undergraduate medical education office. He's going to be looking at our curriculum and working with faculty on how can we enhance our curriculum from an anti-racist perspective, right? How do we educate students about the histories of how Black people were used in medicine and why there's mistrust? Representation matters. So how do we ensure that representation exists for all populations throughout the School of Medicine and in our training, within our curriculum? So, we also have our Health Science Campus LGBT Center, working with Blaze Bush and team. So we actually are one of the few medical schools in the country that have LGBTQ health incorporated into the curriculum. We also have a health certificate program that revolve around LGBTQ health. So at the end of the day, we want to ensure that we're training culturally responsive and culturally aware physicians and practitioners. And so, those are the larger pieces, and that keeps me tied up quite a bit. And then, of course, we work with other state individuals. So we have a Trover campus in Madisonville, Kentucky. So we're really involved with the rural arena. So we have Trover campus, and then we have our Glasgow Family Medicine program down in Glasgow, Kentucky. So we're identifying ways for us to engage externally and internally to enhance what we're doing across the DEI spectrum. And at the same time, try to ensure that we're doing what we can to ensure that everybody, regardless of any of the identity characteristics that they hold, that they maintain, because we know they're intersecting, feel like they belong, right? Wow. And so a lot of times, I do spend time addressing issues that may arise where folks don't feel like they belong. They may feel isolated or feel like they're experiencing bias or being targeted and things of that nature. So how do we hold people accountable, provide the type of education that's needed so that diversity, equity, inclusion is not always punitive? I think a lot of people always see it as something that's punitive, but how do we create the type of climate that people want to stay and be in? Right, versus just waiting for an opportunity to go through the door to leave us. So, we do try to make sure we're offering the type of training and development, ongoing training and development for our faculty, staff, and students to educate themselves on diversity, equity, inclusion. And so we just launched a pilot program for an online diversity, equity, inclusion platform for our top leadership. So right now we're engaging 75 of our top leaders across the School of Medicine in an online DEI platform. And we'll do that through next month. And we'll gather feedback. And if it's something that the leadership likes, we'll look to, expand it so that we'll have it available for all of our faculty, staff, and students. So a lot of it is around the recruitment and retention component, as well as the training and development components. And as I indicated before, ensuring that our faculty, staff, and students has opportunities to be engaged in the community. I'm very proud of the work that many of our students do as it relates to community engagement, as well as our faculty and staff to make a difference and help alleviate any of the healthcare disparities we know exist, not just nationally, but even right here in the city of Louisville. We know that there are healthcare disparities in West Louisville and other parts of the city. So just doing our part to make sure that we can address those healthcare disparities, whether it be from a student perspective, faculty, or a staff perspective. Wow.
Again, that's a lot, even though you condensed it. That's still a lot. And I don't know how you do it, but it all gets done. And we're ever grateful to that you do get it done. Dr. McCart?
Well, I just, again, he did say a lot there, Dr. Compton. I'd like to, I like what you said about sometimes diversity, equity, and inclusion feels like a punishment. And I like that. I really appreciate that you're putting it into part of the culture, and that it's just what we do, right? At the School of Medicine, it's an ongoing thing that happens, not just because there's been a problem, but because it's just our culture and it's the right thing to do. So I really appreciate that. And I had a chance to meet Dr. John Chenault when he was training in research at the health science campus at the library. And it was just a sharp, nice guy, just the heart of a teacher, and was very helpful. So I was glad to see that university announcement when he got that promotion to Director of Anti-Racism Initiatives. So I just want to point that out. I was just happy for him. So, and then the pipeline with K through 12, we see this in higher education, that potential students seem to make up their mind around, and you could tell me better than I can tell you, but 8th grade, 9th grade, about if they're going to college or not. And it's something like you ask 5th graders, they're all going to college, but you ask 8th or 9th graders and maybe not so sure. And particularly in a field as challenging as medicine, that I think that pipeline has to be cultivated and grown. And we had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Marty Polio, who's superintendent of JCPS. And I'll tell you that from what he said on this podcast was those questions are very near and dear to his heart as well. So I think that for some of the problems that Louisville had in 2020 over the summer and into the fall, and really they're just problems that are showing themselves after decades of being present, showing themselves more on a national level. But there are a lot of great, smart, caring, hardworking people working on making things better, and I would include you in that, Dr. Compton. So I'm glad to hear the things that you're working on that we didn't know about over here. So thank you.
Definitely.
And we're trying to change that. And, we're trying to change that, how we publicize what we're doing, because as I indicated earlier, the geographic distance between both campuses create a disconnect, right? And so we want our colleagues on the Belknap campus to know what we're doing on the health science campus and more specifically in the School of Medicine. And that's the best way for us to be able to stay connected with the undergrad students, with the hopes that those that are interested in medicine and science research really get connected with, folks like myself and the countless other individuals that I work with on HSC, so that they can, learn more about what it takes to get into the professional programs that's down at HSC.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're getting close to wrap it up, but Dr. Owens he's the fun one of the bunch. So then maybe he's got some fun questions, but I'll turn it back over to you if that's all right, Dr. Owens.
That's great. So, I added a section that nobody knew about. So Dr. Dwayne Compton, you are the first person to ever go through what I'm about to call our rapid fire session.
Okay.
So I got 3 questions. Just answer them as fast as you possibly can. First things that come to mind, and then we'll go to our really fun question. First rapid fire question. If you could pick one word that would describe your life so far, what would it be and why?
Blessed. And I say that because I am a person of faith, and I know that I wouldn't have gotten here without that faith, and blessed to have had the individuals that are around me to keep me focused.
Okay, next question. What are 3 non-negotiable characteristics that anyone on your team or tribe has to have?
3 non-negotiable characteristics. Wow. So for me, they have to have work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have integrity.
Yep.
And they have to have compassion. I need them to have.
Okay. Last rapid fire question. If you could sit with the 13-year-old self of you, what would you tell yourself?
Wow. Um, the sky's the limit, and don't be afraid of your own talents.
Okay, great. So here's my fun question, right? It's the one that it's a stumper now. I'm telling you right now, it gets everybody that I've asked this question. That's why I keep coming back to it. But it's a fun question. If your life was a title of a book, made up or real, what would it be and why?
Whoa, that is a pretty tough one. The title of a book, I would say, if you can see it, you can achieve it.
Okay.
The story of Dwayne Compton.
We love it. We love it. Great book title. I asked that question. I'm an avid book reader. I read books all the time. And so and it stumps everybody. Everybody's the same way. There's the same way that's everybody's look. That's everybody. And I'm like, it's not a new question.
But it's a question you don't think about often, right? Because we don't think about ourselves in that capacity. So I love those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we let you go and let you get out of here for today, because I know you have a ton of things you need to get accomplished. We've already discussed some of them. So what is your wise counsel that you would love to shout for the mountaintops for the rest of 2021 if you had a message you wanted everybody to hear?
Yeah. So, as I'll go back to the beginning, I'm a Berea College grad. This is Black History Month. For those that may or may not know, Carter G. Woodson is a graduate of Berea College. And I'll leave you with this quote, and I think it's something that folks can take with them. He says that, for me, education means to inspire people to live more abundantly, to learn to begin with life as they find it and make it better. So I'm encouraging people to look at where they are right now in their life and find a way to not only make their life better, but make other people's lives better. And I think we have to do more of that, because I think this whole year of COVID has shown us the good, the bad, and the ugly. When we think about the political landscape that we're in, and a lot of race and racism in the country, we have to find life as we find it and find a way to make it better, not just for ourselves, but for other people.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The one, the only, the Cardinal Call friend, Dr. Dwayne Compton, running things over there at the University of Louisville School of Medicine. I don't even want to name all your titles because I'm not looking at my sheet, so there's too many. He's the Associate Dean. He's the Chief Diversity Officer. That's all we need to know. And we thank him for being on our podcast today, because it's just, like you said, mentioned before, it's one way that we can bridge that gap. Thank you, Dr. Compton.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. We look forward to one day bringing you back on the podcast.
I look forward to it.
Dr. McCart, can't say enough about that conversation with Dr. Compton.
Oh, so interesting. Yeah, they're, I even, as an alumni of the health science campus, I hang out over there from time to time, and I didn't know these things that were going on. I need to learn some more about what he's doing, because he's got some great things going, and some things I think that we could learn from over at the College of Education and Human Development. There's a lot of synergies there we can partner with, I think, and just share best practices. But yeah, he's doing a lot and inspiring, just like many of our guests. Just so much I don't know how he gets it all done, and in charge of a family. Although three daughters and a wife, I don't know who's in charge, but it's a big part of his life, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I think you said it best, right? And I don't know if you always say it online or we talk so much, but everybody's got a story. And I think it's just when you just really just sit down and can take a deep breath, and we can kind of take the hat off, even though he was wearing his hat during our interview, and just kind of like, listen, hey, what are you doing? Right? Like, we have talked, like you said, you mentioned this interview. We talked to Mr. Cleo Battle. We've talked to President Neely Benaputa. We've talked to Vince Tyra. We've talked to Dr. Marty Polio, and it's in an environment where it's like, hey, we know what you do, right? I think you know the president, you know the AD, you know some of the other guests we brought, they're about that title, but when they get a chance to tell you their story, oh my gosh, man, like we're like, I'm with you. I don't with 24 hours in a day and everything we ran down with Dr. Compton, I don't know how it gets done, but this is what we do know. It gets done.
And I don't think he's done. I think there's you talked about some big career aspirations, and I look for him to continue to grow and thrive. And when we bring him back on in some time, we'll see how far he's going, because I can see bright future, and just bright future for the School of Medicine and for Dr. Dwayne Compton. So.
No doubt, no doubt. So let me bring in our talk about our last commercial break here. The UofL program here at the University of Louisville, it fosters leadership, it fosters learning, and it fosters performance to provide relevant solutions for a changing world. We offer programs at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level. Our programs educate professionals who focus on leadership, organizational development, human resources, and workforce development in order to benefit individuals, organizations, and society as a whole. For more information about all this, check us out at UofL.me/ELEOD-OLL. Again, that's UofL.me/ELEOD-OLL. What are your final thoughts for today, Dr. McCart, after talking to Dr. Dwayne Compton?
Well, just some of the things. I mean, he started out, there were so many gems since he first said this, but that emotional intelligence, fostering relationships, learning to deal with your own emotions, and cultivating social capital in a way that you're able to work with others and partner with them on their initiatives, and vice versa, and work together. Because as I mentioned, what Simon Sinek said right before I got on this call with you, is that leadership is a team sport.
Right.
And there's a quote, and another person at the School of Medicine, Dr. Jerry Rabelais, told me, he said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you got to take a team with you.
Right.
And I love that quote. And it's, I believe, an African proverb, and how to travel great distances. And I think Dr. Dwayne Compton would say, developing that team and doing things with a group of people really takes you further. So again, another great episode. I'm just glad I get to saddle up and get in here in the studio with you, sir.
No problem. And as we always say around here, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. When you teach, you never know how many lives you will influence. Cardinal Nation, remember to check us out on YouTube for our video podcast. You can now check us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you want to listen to the audio version, like, subscribe, download, so that you're always aware of the information we're putting out from our podcast that comes out every Friday, to the leadership minutes that Dr. McCart puts out every Monday, and the learning minutes that I put out, Dr. Owens, every Wednesday. So if you want that information, go ahead, like, subscribe, download on the YouTube channel, on any of our podcast channels. And Cardinal Nation, keep leading, keep learning, and keep influencing. We hope to see you soon. But until then, like, subscribe, and download everything we do. All right, you guys take care and stay safe.